Hi everyone, I'm Luke. I work at AppDynamics. It's a pretty massive privilege to work for a kick-ass company, and I've been working with a lot of the guys from Paddy Power, which are over here, kind of come along tonight. Me and Pete have been working with these guys for about a year, and so we're sponsoring tonight. I'm basically picking up the tab, so come and say hi to me at least, and if you've got some cool stories and you work for a cool company, come and let me know and let's have a chat. They say know your audience, so you're not going to get a sales pitch from me. So I'll hand over to Pete. He's got a pretty kick-ass presentation about Call of Duty, and enjoy.
So you can tell he's the sales guy because he thinks I've got a kick-ass presentation. I think I'm about to give a technical presentation after a really good comedy slot from Colm. So, woo. Fortunately, it's only 200 screenshots of Eclipse, so it will be really light and it will be through it in no time. Fortunately, that part was the only joke in it. So, I'm Peter Holditch. I work for AppDynamics, and this presentation is kind of about the idea of DevOps really, and how that is evolving and what kinds of things you need to do to help that evolve in a way that is valuable, because just doing something because it's this year's buzzword friendly thing to do is probably not very sensible, because by the time you've done it, then the buzzwords will be out of fashion. And so unless there's some reason for doing it, then you might as well just carry on with your day job as you are now. So that's the theme of this presentation. So today's game, DevOps is about a change. So what are we changing from? Today's game is you're a developer, you eat pizza, you drink beer, you meet functional requirements and develop code, test it and toss it over a wall to someone. That's great. That's got better over the years. Life started off in this kind of waterfall mentality when people did lots of requirements up front and then cranked out software in one big sort of lump that they vomited over the end of a wall at the end of 9 months, and it turned out it was no longer what anyone wanted. People didn't like that idea because it proved to be pretty useless. So agile development came along. That battle's fought and won. Pretty much everyone's doing that now, by and large, and people who aren't are kind of moving that way pretty quickly. Unit and functional testing, test-driven development, writing tests along with your code, running overnight tests, continuous integration, the whole idea of actually producing something that works and then knowing 6 weeks later when someone else has produced something else that it still works, which once was a kind of a radical idea that no one ever thought of, is now pretty much mainstream. Most people are doing that. This is another battle that's been fought and won. It's no good if the code works on day one because you can manually prove it to someone. You need to know that it's working on day 365 or day whatever you like, and you need to know that without making manual effort, and pretty much everyone's there. Something else that should be becoming yesterday's battle and is increasingly friendly fire. There's nothing like running around proving that it's somebody else's problem when something goes wrong. That historically has been something that IT people are pretty good at. Not necessarily very productive, might get you a couple of rungs up a career ladder, which is awesome, but in terms of your company's objectives, it might not be quite so great. Something else that's not quite so great and still goes on quite a lot these days, even still, the war room. Something goes wrong, management get on the phone to the next layer down of management, who get on the phone to the next layer down of management, and they'll get really excited, and then some poor bastard in a cube somewhere has got to figure out what's gone wrong, with lots and lots of people standing around their desk and red faces, and involves multidisciplinary teams of thousands of people sitting on phone calls for hours. Costs a fortune because all that time is getting spent on some issue when it could be being spent on doing something useful. And, pretty much very adversarial climate. People, in the same way that of the friendly fire kind of syndrome, people are spending all their time covering their arse, proving that they've done their thing, trying to prove that the problem's in someone else's silo. Not a productive thing. So, there are some practices earlier on through that which people have adopted. You kind of get the feeling that things are getting better. We've thrown away waterfall, we've started doing testing, so we know things are more robust and will remain robust functionally over time. But there's some stuff there which, isn't so great. So the problem that underlies those kind of things, the problem is, we've got this battle that we're trying to fight as a company, or whoever employs you is trying to fight as a company. You need to make things, sell things, make money somehow, presumably. Otherwise, I guess you're not getting paid, which is never popular. And, you know, on the battlefield somewhere there's a bunch of developers cranking out code and tossing it over the wall and, you know, getting patted on the back, and they've got objectives about, you know, whatever it is, thousands of lines of code, number of defects burnt down, whatever that they're working towards. And somewhere else you've got this bunch of ops people who are busily trying to keep the site up. And it's all good, but the fact that they're not together is sort of perhaps not what you'd expect. You know, if you're standing on the outside of an organisation looking in, if IT is kind of the nervous centre, the brain and nervous system of an organisation, then you'd expect it to sort of be working in harmony. And so given that IT is, you know, definitely composed of these two groups, why the hell are they on a different place in the map? That's sort of a bit odd and counterintuitive, especially when you look at the bigger pictures, because, you know, actually everyone's organisation is out there in the marketplace with a whole bunch of competitors. I mean, Paddy Power are over here with Betfair trying to steal all their employees, opening an office in here, and, you know, all the other gaming companies. And, you know, they're all trying to get the best odds up as fast as possible, get customers locked in, get customers loyal, get the cash through the door, take the margin, build a business. That's what it's all about. And so actually, you know, with these two crazy bunches of people in here somewhere, this totally lost sight of the big picture, which is that you need to get stuff out, you need to get stuff reliable, and you need to do stuff that attracts whoever consumes what it is you do to your website, whatever. You know, pretty much the business software has eaten the world, as Mark Andreessen said. So this thing needs to be reliable, it needs to attract people, because it's the engine of your business pretty much is IT. And so, you know, that's the bigger battlefield that you need to keep an eye on. The enemy's outside. You're not in a situation where you're trying to get promoted up some career ladder in some monopoly organisation, and, you know, you do 65 years in the civil service and then get popped out the top with a nice pension. You know, you're in a world where if you're not in an organisation that's driving fast forward, then you're in the wrong place, and you'll be in a different place pretty soon when you end up on the front door with well, in the UK it would be a P45. I'm not sure what it is over here, but they're never desperately popular. You know, the whole organisation needs to focus on what's important, which is competing with other organisations that are in the same market space, or even competing with organisations that are not currently in the same market space and are coming in. I mean, the classic example in the UK is petrol stations. All of a sudden, supermarkets decided to become petrol stations and knackered a whole bunch of petrol stations because they didn't see that coming. And then they turned into banks. I mean, you know, imagine if you're a bank that's been around for 300 years and we've got some ancient technology that nobody dares touch because it'll explode. I mean, you know, NatWest, RBS, whatever they're called these days, case in point. This is bad news if this is your systems, and then you've got something like Metro Bank pop up, you know, inflatable bank, just add water, bang, there's a bank. Nice modern systems, you can look after them. It's a bit of a nasty surprise if you're some ancient lumbering dinosaur that can't do anything about it. So you need, and you know, this whole siloed approach, devs and ops is separate, nothing can change fast enough. How the hell are you going to deal with that? So the application development lifecycle, pretty familiar to most people. Develop the code, test the code, run the code, go to 10. There you are. That's pretty much it. I know why developers are paid so much, because it's dead easy, isn't it? That's all you need to do. As that whole view of development, which was that you've got to develop functionality that functionally works, doesn't really take any notice of the fact that there's some poor swine on the other side of the wall you threw it over that needs to make it run within the confines of your data center on the servers that you've got without having to buy more servers for no obvious reason. Has to run it, you know, so you make some profit margin, so running it on an infinitely large data center is probably going to be unpopular. So what we need to start doing is add in these kind of elements where you're actually looking at what's going on in the software and correcting for these things and making course changes for these things, so that as a developer you're starting to become more aware of non-functional requirements. And is this using more CPU than it did last release? Is this going slower than it did last release? Is it needing more resources than it did last release? And so, you know, paying attention to monitoring is a good thing. But once you get into production, you're going to live and die by monitoring, because if the first thing you know about your system being down is your customers phoning up being cross, or even worse, your customers not phoning up and phoning up someone else and going and becoming their customer, then you've got a fairly massive problem. I mean, this slide actually was taken from a presentation that's worth having a watch of. The quote, the reference is down at the bottom there. It's on our website. Actually, it was given by Ariel Tetzelin of Netflix, who are, you know, one of the evangelists, if you like, of DevOps. So it's worth a look at that presentation to talk about not only how they moved from an on-premise to cloud solution over a period of time, but also their approach to building things. And I mean, they talk a lot at events, and everyone's heard of Simian monkeys and all these things that they do. But it's good leading edge DevOps stuff. But worth a look at that presentation. So I mean, that's what you need to do to really stay nimble and large in the modern world of technology. So to do this, the game's changing. It's not that development game anymore. It's not, sit there, crank out some code, toss it over the wall, eat your pizza, and drink your beer and go home. In DevOps, you need to not only develop, test and deploy code, but you need to operate it as well, which means that if you write the bit of code that means that the thing goes tits up at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's you that's on the other end of the phone getting out of bed and looking at it, not some other swine that you threw it over the wall at. So, there's an element of responsibility, which is a great incentive to be more interested in the non-functional behaviour of the software, because if you're going to actually carry the can when it wets itself, then you're likely to try and make it not wet itself so much. And the mission objectives now are firmly, let's make the organisation nimble, let's make the organisation able to achieve its goals. Nothing to do with, how many thousands of lines of code can I write, how many function points can I toss over the wall, how many defects can I burn down? They're all means to an end, which is how can our organisation be better at what we do than the other organisations that are trying to outcompete us in the marketplace. Essential ingredients for that, obviously beer still, haven't lost the beer, but we can maybe replace the pizza, because we're all on salad diets now anyway, because we've overdone the pizza and the calories in the beer, we don't even want to go there. But whiteboards and communication, this is really about bringing things together and making IT work as a nervous system for an organisation instead of as a bunch of squabbling toddlers, which I think has been more the historical kind of organisational alignment. Which means from a development perspective that the environment you're working in is changing. It's no longer sitting in a cube, tossing code out, tossing code in continuous integration, whatever. You need access to production. This is about this kind of responsibility throughout the life cycle, and being a developer doesn't somehow absolve you from the 4 o'clock in the morning phone call. This is about being involved in the whole life cycle. Which another thing, of course, that's happening is as systems get more and more distributed, more and more complicated, scale bigger and bigger, the notion of somehow reproducing issues in test is pretty much nonsense. You can't build a test environment that's the same as a production environment in pretty much any case. So, if you're lucky, you might reproduce an issue on a small scale, but you're taking a chance trying, and you're also burning a shed load of time trying. So how much better to not have to reproduce issues, but actually look at the issues where they arise and be able to deal with them there. So, the environment that you're operating in is different as well. It's not just nice, clean room, sandbox, performance test environment. It is the real nasty world with change control in it and customers on it and all of these things that make life a bit more inconvenient than perhaps developers are traditionally used to. Large, distributed, virtual, complex environment. Recommended equipment for this: release automation and monitoring. Release automation is definitely key. If you're going to be... actually, this is a corollary of Agile that I didn't mention when that picture of Agile came up a while ago, but if you are cranking software out at 2 weekly, 4 weekly, 6 weekly intervals instead of 2 or 3 times a year, which was the historical rate, you better be blooming sure that you can reliably deploy it every time, because if it's a twice a year event, then knife and forking it by hand and crafting the deployment is perhaps all right, because you're not pissing away too much time, you're only doing it a couple of times a year. But if you're doing it every 2 or 3 weeks, then you definitely don't want to be crafting it by hand in some sort of cottage wood carving sort of a way. You really want to be able to pull a button and have it happen. And by the way, pull another button and have it unhappen again if it all went pear-shaped. Automation is clearly a bit of a... It comes out of that whole agile development practices thing, but in terms of getting agile all the way through to delivery to the customer at the far end of that pipeline, automation is really important. And in order to know that you have to pull the handle to pull it back out from production, know how it's going in general, monitoring is going to be pretty important as well. So that's sort of where we're going here with this. And it might surprise you to hear where AppDynamics fits in, but we'll get to that in a while. So, we're going to move to DevOps, right? We're going to have a big change. Whoopee, it's the flavour of the month. It's the buzzword of the year. Everyone's ranting around about it. Clearly we've got to do this. Let's get on with it. Well, how do you know when you've done it? Pretty much if you're going to start out on anything, it would be a good idea to know when you've finished. And probably it will also be a good idea to know when you've succeeded. Otherwise, you really look like you're just accumulating another buzzword for your CV. So, we need to do something about this issue. What could we measure to do that? Number of deployments. Right, okay, so we've gone from 2 releases a year into production to 2 releases a minute. Great. Symmetric might be a good one. It's an idea. Number of features. Yeah, we used to, every 6 months, we delivered 5 new major functional areas, and now we deliver 500. That's a metric as well. Might be interesting. It's something that might be worth measuring. Time to market. Used to take us 9 years to do anything, and now it takes 9 minutes, and we can reinvent our business in 20 seconds, and that would be good. So, that's clearly, potentially, something you might want to measure as well and be able to manage that time. Availability. Everyone's favourite metric. 5 nines. How many millions of pounds have been spent on 5 nines? 5 nines worth of green servers when the application doesn't work are pretty useless. My infrastructure's up. Tell the customer your infrastructure's up. When you're on the phone to a call centre. Sorry, my screen's slow today, but my infrastructure's green. It's not something that happens very often on those phone calls. It's more, I've worked with some companies that actually train their call centre staff to sort of make banter with customers so they don't get so pissed off with the really slow screens, which is amusing when you think how much it costs per person sat in a call centre handling calls, and how many of those you could make unemployed by actually making it more efficient. That's probably the most interesting technical workaround I ever heard is train the call centre staff in off-piste conversation skills to the classic tap dance while the screen loads. I bet all those places were 5 nines from an infrastructure perspective. Great. Probably not a useful metric. But on the other hand, if all your servers are dead, you probably want to know about that. So something to bear in mind. So we've got all our automation, we've got our development and test and deployed, all automated. I'm going to argue at this point that doesn't necessarily add up to success. It's probably necessary conditions for success, but not sufficient for success. There's probably more that you need to do. Automation's good, we like that, we can deploy things quickly. Deploying things quickly isn't always good news. You can deploy things very quickly, which go bang very quickly, and then if you've automatically deployed them, they can go bang on a very large scale. There's John's dinosaur presentation with a classic example of a fund manager that blew its own head off by deploying a code change that needed a bit of a configuration change that was only rolled out to half the servers, and so the thing, instead of shutting off when it was trading a bit mental, it cranked up the volume, and the company went bust. It's slightly inconvenient. So don't do that. Automation isn't necessarily a panacea, I think, is the message here. You need to, this is where the monitoring thing comes back in. You need to be aware of what your systems are doing and make sure there's some checks and balances in place. If you look at this survey of AppDynamics customers, how many releases do you do? Monthly releases 17%, weekly releases is a bit faint up there. Weekly releases 21%, daily releases 3%. You wonder what was wrong with yesterday's release if you've got to do it every day, but just a thought. Greater than 2 month release, 58%. But of those people who are doing the nice, funky monthly, weekly, daily releases, a third of them had a Sev 1 each month. So, it's a bit like having a strong curry the night before and going to the toilet. There's a lot out, but it's not necessarily good.
Who's your sample here?
This is AppDynamics customers, 250 AppDynamics customers. It was just, we do. One of the things that, I'm going to wander off into a corporate sales pitch for a moment here, but there's a good reason for it. One of the things we're really proud of is Net Promoter Score, so we wander around asking our customers, would you recommend us to a friend or colleague? And we get a score of 84, which is on a scale of -100 to 100, huge. And it's one of the things that we really care about. And, most software vendors are down at, well, I don't know, there's one competitor who's at 3. A lot of enterprise companies bumble around 30, even Apple with and stuff are around 70. So we're really pleased with that. But the reason for telling you that is we go around surveying our customers every so often, saying, what do you think, what do you do? You know, because the other thing that we need to try and do is understand them better, so that we can understand their needs, build a better product that fits their needs better. And so it's that survey from the customer base. And in fact, you really can't see it here, but when you push your button now on your whatever that thing was called, because when you look at this slide on the playback, at the bottom of this slide is a link to a blog article that tells you all about that survey. So, failure. Yes, don't talk about failure. It's really bad. You'll lose your job if you fail. Hush it up, cover it up, hide it somewhere. That's a really, really bad idea, actually, because if you're never going to talk about it, you're never going to learn from it. And if you're never going to learn from it, you'll do it again and again and again. And I mean, that's the definition of madness, isn't it? Doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting different results. So, I mean, you need to understand, you need to root cause things, you need to understand what went wrong, and you need to not do them again, and which means that you need to talk about the failures and you know, and somehow manage to build a culture where you can talk about failures without getting fired, which tends to shut people up pretty rapidly. So, how can we achieve some of these objectives? Monitoring, definitely necessary. You need to know what's going on. There's no two ways about it. If we have no idea what's going on, then we've got no way of controlling it, no way of managing it. We might as well all just sort of, you know, cross our fingers and hope for the best, which is never a popular strategy, especially with management types. Communication. I mean, that's really important. We start off by saying that, you know, there's the ops people in one place, there's the dev people in the other place. This is a bad thing. You need integration and interchange between these people because, you know, software has a life cycle. It's kind of organic in some sense. You produce it, you stick it, it has a life of its own. You know, it's like having children. You know, they're still sponging off you at the age of 23 when you want them to leave home. Your applications are the same. They never die. They're just out there. They become legacy, which is a polite word for everything that you really don't want to understand because, you know, the bloke that wrote it left and it's all too hard. So, you know, getting some end-to-end understanding of this is really important. So, if we want to do DevOps, what should we be monitoring to get to a position where we can actually deliver some of this funky agility to market whilst under control in a blame-free culture sort of stuff that DevOps ought to mean? Big picture of the application is dead useful. I mean, even if it's only just to take it to management and say, this is really complicated because there's lots of lines on it. Because a lot of the time, you know, when things are exploding and cross managers turn up at your desk, you're just the really annoying reason that their business is no longer functioning rather than someone who's actually got a complicated system and a really quite difficult job. I mean, my background is in middleware, so I've sort of, if you want to twist it that way, been doing DevOps for ages because it's always the piece of software that is completely invisible unless it's broken, and then it's its fault for whatever happened. And you know, applications at some level are the same, and a board of directors doesn't give a monkeys if your applications are running because there's some poor bloke who hasn't had a holiday for 300 years who works 24 hours a day in the data center, and you know, his beard's down at the floor and he only eats pizza when he's thrown it through the door because that's the only way you can keep your applications running. No one actually minds. So, you know, just a way of articulating the complexity would be good. And, you know, if that mythical bloke with his tossed pizzas and long beard is the only bloke that understands the system, when he goes under the mythical bus, you've got a bit of a non-mythical problem. And, you know, even just bringing on another member of the team is difficult because that's one of the things about operations and developers. Operations tend to have a very good kind of gut feeling for how things should behave in the large because they sort of understand end-to-end how things go, and you get these people who kind of stare at dashboards and sort of tut a bit and you know, kick something every so often when something changes slightly and everyone's wondering what they're doing. But they just kind of, by osmosis really, have understood how a system works end-to-end. Whereas on the other hand, the developers are pretty much, you know, locked in some functional area delivering some piece of functionality. And so when you expose developers to an operations environment, they're going to, you know, they'll have some, you know, very detailed understanding of some small piece of the system, but trying to understand the context of it in the large and how it impacts things end to end is not something that will necessarily be one of their natural skills. So, you know, understanding that end to end thing lets you onboard people quicker, lets you manage things more easily over a wider team, lets developers look into production and understand the consequences of what they do. There's a whole number of reasons why this makes things a lot more efficient. I mean, really, you know, I guess whoever put the human body together probably didn't have one team go off and design the heart and another team go off and design the kidneys and then just toss them in the body at the end and see what happened. You know, I mean, there's probably a bit more sort of a holistic approach than that. And so you need to, you know, any complex system needs a holistic approach to understanding how all the bits interact. And so this sort of big picture view is useful. And we've got a customer who's one of the big web conferencing services, and every so often they go down. So it's nice to have a little peek at their environment when they do. And there's always a big red server in the middle of it. And I have no idea what their software is at all. But what I do know is if you've got a tool saying this has gone red, then that's probably where you want to look first. And if you've got that many places that you might want to look, having a big red flashing thing is a helpful start, if nothing else. So, you know, there's a lot of good reasons for having an end-to-end understanding of the big picture. Finding any maps help a lot. You know, I mean, this is another customer. Understanding how things connect together, understanding where the problems are, understanding what looks out of whack. It's a useful thing. Being able to understand historical dependencies over time as well. I mean, monitoring things obviously isn't a here and now, let's have a look at the screen kind of thing necessarily. I mean, obviously if something's broken and you look at the screen because you know something's broken and you see something's red, then that's great, you can fix it quickly. But what you really want to do is understand when things are likely to be broken soon so that you can find problems before they actually happen. And so being able to have lots and lots of metrics from across your system and being able to sort of look at them, correlate them, figure out the relationships between them so that you can start to predict when failures are going to happen based on, you know, knowing that this has gone a bit higher than usual and so these other things depend on it. This is useful as well. So having a whole bunch of data end to end that you can then analyse retrospectively and historically is a useful thing as well, so that you can start getting a bit more proactive and in fault finding. Good example here, you know, we've got another customer who is a hotel booking site, and they were constantly troubleshooting things. You know, the booking process was going slow, and they were constantly troubleshooting things and not finding anything. It turned out in the end that they had problems with PayPal. You know, every so often PayPal slowed down, and it sort of was back pressure through their system, and all sorts of things started going pop, and it was PayPal's problem. So, you know, another thing you can do is monitor SLAs. You can understand if it's external components that have got problems, and you can not spend your life troubleshooting your own stuff that's not broken when someone else's stuff is broken. You can talk to them about their SLAs, and if you're delivering SLAs up to other people, again, having this information available is a useful thing. So, you know, if you don't monitor anything, you can't learn, and if you can't learn, you can't improve, and if you can't learn or improve, then you can't change. And clearly all of this is a bad thing. This is pretty common troubleshooting methodology. Oh, it's broken. All right, we'll restart the servers. Is it fixed now? Oh, all right, we'll stick the last release on it. Is it working now? Good. And then the next bit, reproduce is nightmarish because, you know, as I already said, no one's got a test environment that's anything like the production environment. Nobody really knows exactly what was going on at the time anyway. There's probably half a dozen people scurried around half a dozen logs and got half an idea about what might be happening, and then they go off playing, you know, whack-a-mole at best. Probably more like hunt the needle in the haystack. And, you know, so that means that you've not only got a test environment tied up, but you've got a team of 5, 6, 7 people tied up searching for something that may or may not even exist in the environment they're trying to look for it in. And by the way, all those people are not actually writing the code and delivering the new capabilities and whatever that they're paid actually to do. So, you know, you cannot possibly have this kind of troubleshooting mentality and this completely separated problem-solving mentality, because what ends up happening is that issues just recur because people just restart the server, and that's just what happens, and nothing ever gets any better. Because, yeah, you can't reproduce big complex environments. It's just, you know, nobody's got enough tin or time or inclination, to be honest. So, you know, the cloud leaders, this whole blame culture thing, the cloud leaders have definitely got away from that. I mean, if you look at Amazon, for instance, you know, they have these famous outages every so often, but nobody gets too upset. I mean, people get a bit grumpy. But I mean, to be honest, people that are building applications and sticking them in Amazon and not expecting failures to happen haven't read the manual, because the manual sort of says expect failures to happen. Have your chaos monkeys build things redundantly so that they can fail without you noticing, and so on. And, you know, the other thing that Amazon do is a massive root cause analysis of everything, and they publish all of this publicly. Oh yeah, we were broken because of this, and we did this about it, and it won't happen again. That's the mentality and the sort of processes that you need to adopt to be able to actually be anyway agile, because the only way of defending from failure if you're not doing that is to not change. When it's not broken, don't touch it and hope for the best. And that isn't good from a business perspective. So, what's DevOps? It is the latest sexy buzzword. It means a million different things from a million different people. This John Willis guy, who's one of the leading evangelists of the whole idea, that was his definition. Being agile and going for a harder DOWNTIME as quickly as possible. So you have an idea, how quickly can you roll it out to market without passing go or collecting £200 or everything failing and falling around your ear rolls? I think evidence for how immature it is as in terms of people actually knowing what it is and so on. It comes from this survey, which isn't our customer base. It's CA did this one. Is it all hype? They asked. Does it help application delivery? 25% said yes, it helps. 30% said no, it's hype, and 38% and a clue what they were talking about. So I think the conclusion from all of that is it's really quite immature. We're not here at a stage. There's definitely some sort of people who've crossed the chasm, who are innovating and out in the forefront of this, who are doing it and have realised some benefits. There are a bunch of people who get fed a bunch of marketing nonsense by a bunch of companies and just fall asleep and go back to normal. And then there's a bunch of people who don't know yet. So if you are doing this, well done, because you're in quite good company in terms of being innovative and at the forefront of the way things are going. So to take a step back again to that big picture, as an organisation as a whole, we talked about things being up, things being down, service levels, that's all good. But as a business as a whole, what's making the business successful? Well, probably revenue. A lot of businesses have revenue as a metric. Customers, number of customers, size of transactions, I don't know, but there's going to be some customer-related stuff in there somewhere, because no one was ever successful without some customers. Well, except blokes that live up mountains and say wise things, but they don't tend to be many of them, and they don't have much IT, so I don't meet many of them. Product leadership, being out there as a thought leader. Netflix, preeminent example of people that go and blaze trails and recruit the best of the best because they're out there in the technical sense, and recruiting the best customers because they're out there in terms of offering the best odds, the best in-game gambling experience, or whatever it is, the best thing that people flock to because it's so fab and best, and the best tablet, the best whatever. Number of downloads, maybe, I don't know. It depends what your business is, but that's possibly a metric that's interesting. So the point here really, we're trying to align operations and development, but having done that, why not align the whole thing with the business? Because then, this conversation with the dudes in the walnut room and the poor guy with the long beard and the disconnect, you can maybe start to get rid of that. If you can talk to them in language that they understand about what's going on, then you can maybe get budgets so that you can have two blokes with long beards. That'd be good. Or whatever it is that you actually need to move things forward. You need to speak to business people in the language of the business to be able to do that. So you need to collect metrics that talk to what impact your IT thing is having on the business, which is definitely not the 5 nines, my servers are all up, because no one gives a toss. So if DevOps is about the idea to cha-ching, why not measure the cha-ching part? The people in the walnut room understand that, so it's a good thing to measure, have that measurement on tap. So from a monitoring perspective, let's not look at servers and I/O and CPU and memory. Let's look at those things, they're all very exciting. But they're not that exciting. They're interesting if you're trying to troubleshoot something. You want to know what they were so that you can see what exploded first. But as leading indicators of customers having an unhappy time, they're pretty rubbish because, maybe your servers are running hot, but no one cares. Maybe your servers are idle, and it's because the application's locked up. There's no guaranteed correlation between metrics like that and what people really care about, which is obviously the customer experience. So, let's start by measuring business transactions. Let's follow, check in, check out, log in, log out, whatever it is that your thing does. Place bet, claim winnings, cry, I don't know. Measure those things, and then you can alert based on real customer experiences of real things that real people care about, and real people being your customers, and therefore the people in the walnut tables. So again, a projector issue down here. I've got my 5 nines. My servers are all green, but this checkout transaction, 2,494 of these things had a problem of some sort. If on average we take $75 per one of those, then we've got $186,000 of revenue at risk. I don't care how green my servers are. If I go and tell someone with a walnut table that, they'll probably get upset, even if the servers are green. So it's a good thing to measure, to be on top of that sort of information and proactively to be able to do something about it if you are starting to bleed money like that. Even before your servers have gone down. I mean, hey, they might all be up. So definitely the message here I'm suggesting is monitor services over infrastructure. I mean, the infrastructure is great, and yes, if it's all caught fire, then do something about it, because it will be silly not to. But actually, it's very likely your application can die without anything catching fire physically, and so you need to know what's going on, and especially if you're moving to the cloud, then you don't even probably know very much about the physical infrastructure you're running on. You just sort of trust Amazon not to kill it. So, measuring these things is a useful thing to be able to do. I'm suggesting that, if you really want to get that whole DevOps alignment thing going and get a proper nervous system going through your organisation, then this is going to be a useful thing to do. Monitor services over infrastructure, inventory service. And these are also conversations, you can go and have with the walnut table people. We know in the next sprint we need to devote the next sprint to solving this issue because we've got a problem with the checkout service. You might get some investment on that versus, I think my servers are all red. It's a useful tool for a number of different reasons. Historical data is important as well. If you're doing releases, however often you're doing them, you want to make sure, hopefully in test, but certainly in production, that you have made things better, you haven't made things more broken, things are getting leaner and meaner, and every day and every way getting better and better. So being able to compare behaviours over the present and the past is an important thing to be able to do as well. So having those metrics is great, and then having a historical archive of those metrics is greater. And if you've got unplanned downtime, know how much it's going to cost you, because someone from the walnut table land is going to come and tell you eventually, and they probably won't be very happy when they're doing it. So it'll be good to know in advance and even be able to guard against it as a result. But this is all very well if you're a gambling website or a Amazon.com or something that transacts money, and you can look at one transaction and see that it is worth $75 or however much it is, pounds, euros. But if your app isn't revenue critical, what are you going to do about it? Well, why not measure some of that, less tangible from a business perspective perhaps, but metrics around the collaboration thing. I mean, you're trying to foster a sort of cohesive, cooperative IT department that works across the life cycle. So measure some of those metrics of cooperation. Mean time to innocence, that's an important metric for most people. When that war room thing happens, everyone, all the angry people are on the phone, everyone's covering their arse, blaming each other. The last bloke standing saying it's not me, not saying it's not me, everyone's around their desk, and it's a very unpleasant time. And it might turn out that it's their fault. I mean, let's hope we're in a blame-free culture and we're not saying it's their fault and we're using it all as a learning, sharing experience, but maybe not. And it might also turn out that they were just the slowest to read their logs, and it turns out that they've got no problem, and then we go around the whole loop again. This is bad, waste of time kind of stuff. Mean time to innocence is a metric to avoid rather than to measure. But how about mean time to resolution? That's a bit more positive, and caring and sharing and whatever. And that's quite an important metric. How long does it take if we have a severity 1 or 2 issue? How long does it take to put it right? This is something it's good to have a handle on, and good to make sure that time is coming down over time, and you're doing all the right things to get leaner and meaner and better every way and every way and every day. Mean time between failures, that's another useful thing to know. My website is going to go pop once every 8 weeks. It used to go pop once every 3 weeks, so I've got better. It all sounds bad, but actually if it's going pop less than it used to, then you're going in the right direction. You can demonstrate that, and the person to whom you're demonstrating it might consequently believe that you have some value and continue to give you a job, which is generally considered to be good. And actually, if you're measuring these things, then you can end up with a walnut table conversation out of it, because all of these things cost money. Time spent in war room is a lot of people time, opportunity costs from building things, and also time, just people time that you're burning and that you could burn more productively. So you can build this stuff into a business case quite easily. My mean time to repair issues has gone from 16 hours to 5 hours. Well, actually that's a saving of X 100,000 euros a year in saved manpower. My mean time between failures has gone from once every 3 weeks to once every 9 weeks. Well, so over a year, I used to have 50 incidents, and now I have 20 odd. these are good things that you can actually turn into hard money, and so you can get people to invest in projects to do this. So I mean, when you're starting to think, okay, DevOps is sexy, it's the next thing I want on my CV, how the hell do I sell this? This is the answer, look for the benefits, because there are benefits to be had that are meaningful, even if you're not doing an application that generates $75 a click, which is clearly trivial to measure. There are ways of measuring this in ways that you can present to people that will get investments and get this sort of stuff done. And by the way, I mean, this sort of thing is what Luke and myself do when we're not trying to follow comedians in strange places in Dublin. Work with customers to figure out how things are now, how things could be using our tools and technology that I've spared you much of the detail of, and figuring out what the business impact of that is. I mean, this is how most people buy most things, because I mean, unless there's a case to do something, then my advice is don't do anything, because it's easier just to go home and spend some time with your kids. But it's your jobs to get better. It's our jobs to help you get better by selling your software along the way. So collaborating on a thing like this is actually a really useful exercise that we go through with a lot of customers during the course of we selling, you buying, you improving, we improving. Every day and every way, it all gets better and better. So, if that's not your role, if you're just in for the developing, in for the beer and the pizza and the, sod the people over the wall, then fine. But, there's still no harm in finding some metrics that you do care about and measuring them. Because if you're not measuring anything, you don't understand it. And if you don't understand it, you can't change it. And, that's fine. But maybe there might be something better over the horizon, but you never know if you don't even know where the horizon is. So there's always metrics that you can find, wherever you are and wherever you're going. It's worth thinking about what is important to you and to the people to whom you report, and figuring out a way of measuring those things. So that's the end of me. You can all go and start playing with Rubik's Cubes now. In summary, look at the big picture. Siloed IT is a really bad thing. Don't do it. Organisations are about organisations. Define success, automate and monitor, and use feedback between the two so that you're not automating failure. Measure success so that you can evangelise it and get a pay rise, get a new job, get a job on the speaking circuit, talking at wacky conferences in far-flung Amsterdam locations, or whatever it is that you want to do. And if you want to go and look at what our stuff is, you can go to our website and it tells you about our stuff, which I haven't done very much of. And you can try it out for free as well. So, it actually works, because you can try it out without us even visiting you and starting to do nasty, silling things to you.
You never have to talk to me.
You never have to talk to Luke. He's a very nice chap, but if you don't want to talk to him, that's fine. You don't have to. So, game over. The Rubik's Cubes, by the way, when you come to solve them, have got two white faces, but one of them's got one big logo and one of them's got lots of small logos. So there's a picture to demonstrate the end goal to which you're moving. And thanks, there you go. Any questions, I guess? Or shall we just start mucking with Rubik's Cubes?
Can I ask you a question? Yeah. How, from a business perspective, how hard or easy is it to find actual good DevOps?
Well, I mean, it is an emerging discipline. There are some people that are in the avant-garde and are very good at it, and there are some people that are trying to get there, and there's some people that are really terrible and will take ages. I mean, the good news for us is that the people who are terrible and will take ages have got enormous ROI cases to do anything, because they're usually so insane and broken. It's becoming more and more common. I mean, a lot of people are talking about, I mean, certainly when this term first surfaced kind of 2 years ago, there was a lot of talk and no, it was all mouth and no trousers, I guess, in some sense. Increasingly, there are people doing it, I mean, I think it's gone from CTO office dreaming to actually delivery. I mean, people are doing continuous delivery, platform as a service, and these sorts of things that are the technical underpinning of this kind of thing. I'd say maybe of the customers that and it also depends on the vertical industry as well. I mean, I guess that's the other thing, because if you talk to people like banks, even investment banks who tend to invest in technology a lot, they're still quite siloed and hidebound and things. If you talk to e-commerce type people who've more or less come from nothing and have lived in this world of agility forever, they tend to be ahead of the curve as well. So I think it also depends by industry segment. But I mean, I don't know if you would characterise it in a different way, but I mean, I'd say whereas you almost found no one doing it 2 years ago, you now maybe 30% of people are doing it to a greater or less extent, and probably another 15 or 20 are seriously looking at moving in that direction.
Certainly the people I've met, a recent investment bank engagement, the people that put their hands up and said, I'm going to be a DevOps guy instead of a developer, they're the people that are absolutely accelerating their careers. You know, they're the people that are front and center of the change movement, even in dinosaur type organizations. So, you know, I think the people that are willing to adopt that sort of methodology are the people that are really making a difference. Any other questions before I conclude my half a minute spiel? So as Pete said, it's free. Okay, so I know a lot of people do sort of just, you know, development. AppDynamics give away our product for free forever. It's called Lite, so you get it. You can do Java, .NET, PHP monitoring. You can download it off the website, get hold of it. Please speak to any of the Paddy Power guys because they've been putting up with me for a year, and Pete. So I'm sorry, but you know, they've kind of come out the other side of seeing what we can do with the full product. And if you want to try the full product, you work for an enterprise or, you know, a sizable company, you can download that for free as well. But, you know, hey, if you want to try it for a bit longer, let me know, and I'll sort you out with a trial. And I'd love to know what you're up to, and if you think you can use something like this, what Pete talked about, then I'd love to know. So good luck with the impossible task of something I've never ever been able to achieve in my life. Good on you, Barry, for coming up with the idea, and enjoy the band. Thanks for your time and attention. Love you. Catch. This is a test of your catching skills now. So we've got .NET, Java, PHP, Node.js, so they're all current. Every relational database. Python's next.
Hang on, guys, don't start yet. It's not. That's not fair.
Oh.
Has anybody got a bet on Paddy Power got this on their?
Who's not got one?
What are the spot-ons?
Thanks very much.